Good afternoon and good evening. I know it's prime time in EU, and I hope you have gotten some lunch on the East Coast. And for those of you who are waking up and joining on the West Coast, welcome uh, to the second session on day three. ONIF has been such a great success, and thank you all for the feedback you have been giving us on the quality of speakers and the content. So we're really excited to kick this session off. I would say we're saving absolutely the best for this session. Some of the top-notch leaders in the industry are going to give us a view of what we should all be thinking about in 2021 and beyond. And so let me kick it off by introducing our first speaker today. Obviously he works at Ericsson, which needs no introduction, a global leader there. Anders Rosengren is the head of architecture and technology at Ericsson. And let's see what his views are on what we should all be looking at. So please welcome Anders.
Thank you very much, Arpit. I think always great to be here. I love these conferences and the combination of technology and open source and the industry ecosystem. It's just such a great place to be. So I'm here today to give some view on how Ericsson looks at the future of 2021, as you say, and going forward. And we see the year of 2021 as the year of 5G, but also how we see edge, orchestration, and exposure that is key to develop and deliver on key enterprise use cases beyond mobile broadband. So let me start by talking about some of the use cases and opportunities as a telco operator that exists beyond mobile broadband. So going towards B2B and B2B2X. And of course, private networks comes quite naturally as an opportunity for operators. And then, of course, you also look at combining that with edge compute to bring on not only the private network connectivity, but also the capability of hosting applications and combining that with connectivity. And then, of course, industrial IoT, as you see in the middle here, is a great opportunity to combine those capabilities of edge and private 5G networks into addressing low latency and ultra high reliability. Then, of course, big data, another of these capabilities that we will see much more of, building on top of connectivity, bringing the data back from the sensors, from the IoT systems, utilizing that to optimize your processes. And then, of course, security. I think we all know about the increased threat vectors, but also the increased requirements on distributed working and the necessary functionality to be built on top of that. So we see a lot of opportunities for operators in this space, building on combining connectivity with additional applications, with additional features to deliver a really great service to the enterprise. And 2021 is the year to start the journey on this. From Ericsson, we definitely see 5G as an transformative event as we move forward here, not just for the speeds and feeds, of course, but really as a connected innovation platform for applications and users. And of course, it starts with key technologies that we built into the system to really live up to the promises of 5G around massive MIMO, around AI, around cloud native, around intent and model driven, around energy efficiency, all of the capabilities and the technologies that we use to build the function and characteristics that make up that platform. And of course, then you come to, it should be highly efficient, of course, multi-purpose to run different type of connectivity and applications, mobile radio access to cut the cord. Then, of course, zero-touch management and orchestration, that is close at the heart of the LF networking foundation and ONAP, of course. So that's something that we really are building on. Cloud native, we have CNCF as the sponsor here. I think that's fantastic. And we see how CNCF is really creating a fantastic ecosystem around the cloud native, which we are using to build a cloud native 5G core and delivering that and with all the promises and capabilities that cloud native bring. On top of that, of course, we see then that this is creating a set of values for the users. So predictable connectivity, distributed processing, we see embedded intelligence, and as well as continue to build on that. Security as a high on the agenda, and privacy, and of course cost efficient. And with this, we enable the operators to address different type of users, not only the consumer, but definitely the industries, a larger group of peoples, and also government and first responder networks, for example, as different users, and combining, enabling that on top of this mobile network, on top of this network platform. So what kind of use cases do we see there? And what does this, I mean, if we dive a little bit deeper into these use cases and how the network platform is then supporting that. So if we start with warehouses and factories, I think manufacturing and digitalization of the manufacturing space has been very high on the agenda. Down to the right here, you see smart manufacturing. Ericsson has the first automated factory in Texas came online end of last year. And we see there the requirements are quite stringent, of course. It's for on-prem edge. We see that is a necessity there, combining with connectivity, a lot of access points in a lot of SIM devices or different users, conveyor belts, for example, a lot of robots, and not just the manufacturing robots, but of course also automated guided vehicles, for example, transporting stuff between them. All of them require low latency and high reliability to secure the service. Video surveillance and different applications, operations, technology applications running on top of that edge, connecting and interacting with the connectivity through a set of exposed services. It brings the key benefits around connectivity and applications, of course, centralized management, security, data privacy, and ultra low latency. Another one, and rather different use case, is then that you actually do want to bring the technology out of the business. So you want a very smooth and quick pop-up store established. You don't want a lot of on-prem IT equipment and connectivity equipment. So you want a simple connectivity, and you want the operator to host that connectivity for you. So having then still low latency is important. High bandwidth is definitely important as well, security, and to reduce the on-prem IT cost, etc. So I think these are the two examples of use cases, two examples of benefits that the combination of connectivity and applications edge that brings that to the enterprises, and that the operators can really benefit from using and implementing. If we move on then from this and talk a little bit more about the network as a platform, I think that will also be a word of 2021 and going forward, where we see how we put things like network slicing in place, how we put things like edge combining with connectivity. And I think we definitely, and I think in the telco industry, we sometimes get a little bit too nerdy. We are super fascinated about 3GPP and different APIs and complex ways. But we also know that the application developers on top of this, they are not 3GPP experts. They want a simple API that they can easily understand and utilize to connect to the network and build to utilize the capabilities, for example, latency, resiliency, reliability, security, other things that they can get out of the network and embed as features and support for their application that they are building. So they want simple APIs. They want those APIs exposed into the development environment, but they also want the APIs for partner onboarding, consumer onboarding, and the operator needs, of course, to provide capabilities towards the users, the enterprise, for self-service portals, etc. Below that API for external integration, there is a set of automation and orchestration machinery to orchestrate the workloads in the network, in the mobile network, as well as the third-party applications, to bring together a set of end-to-end services. And below that, of course, the network components, as well as the cloud platforms on edge and central. provided from a hybrid and multi-cloud perspective. So here we definitely see the need of abstracting and presenting a reliable and simple and easy to use set of APIs, as well as the capability, of course, to orchestrate and expose the capabilities and the features and the network functions at the place that they should be, whether that's on-prem with the enterprise, on the network edge, or central to deliver certain types of KPIs and maintain SLAs for the enterprise. But it's, of course, then an open source conference, and I think I'm, as I said in the beginning here, super excited to be here, and we see definitely, of course, this ecosystem being built through a set of standards, whether it's 3GPP for the network functions or TM Forum for the APIs that are needed to interact and create a multi-user and multi-vendor environment, an easy integration environment. We also see the industry alliances, and that comes back to the need from a telco industry to listen to the enterprises and the application builders that are going to use that. That's so important to listen. For example, we work in 5G ACIA together with a set of manufacturing industry specialists. They give their requirements on the API. This is the functionality we want to access. This is the way we want to access it. And this is what we need to know, and this is what you need to abstract away. So that is super important. And then, of course, we see open source helping us building the foundation, building this in an open and collaborative way. And of course, Linux Foundation, Edge, and networking are key parts here. As I said, Cloud Native Compute Foundation as well is also, of course, a very integral and important part of this whole solution. ORAN and ONAP are bringing different types of capabilities. And of course, Ericsson sees the value of this, sees the value of engaging and using open source together with our proprietary logic to create the full end-to-end solution. So finally then, when I spoke inside Ericsson and collaborated with a set of the people that are engaged in open source, I asked them, okay, what kind of message, what kind of call for actions do you see as important here? How do we make open source lead the way even more here to build the necessary foundation for the operators and for the telco equipment vendors to deliver on the requirements of enterprises to really make 5G the transformational event? And we came with three topics here. I think we see with cloud native and definitely a need to move much faster and quicker towards the cloud native way of working. So integrating orchestration and management of the resources together with the software lifecycle management and SVDP. And here we see ONAP and the CDF Foundation that there is we really want to continue to drive that collaboration and that integration to really maintain that and improve that collaboration and bring additional features here to the industry. Then I think we are working in a multi-vendor reality, and we see Kubernetes being a foundational element, but we also see that there is no aligned view today. So creating a common Kubernetes profile from a CNCF to really drive simplification and efficiency in the ecosystem and industry when you're orchestrating different workloads across different Kubernetes alternatives. That will be an important way for open source to support the industry. And then I think increased collaboration, not only inside a specific open source project, but between them. And I think we have an example here of a DMAP and secure an alignment there with Kafka and Minio instead of maintaining bespoke functionality inside ONAP. So really urging the open source community to start even better. I know you are working on that already, and we are working on that, but really even better collaborate across to build that full end-to-end system in the best and most efficient way. So with that, I close my talk here. Thank you very much for listening to me.
All right. Thank you, Anders. This is very insightful. I think your end-to-end view of pulling in, core, edge, access, enterprise, telcos, cloud, kind of bringing it all has really, really, resonated. I like the call to action also. There are a few questions that have come in. I think the first one I would ask is, there's a project, Anuket, where there's RA2 that defines common Kubernetes profiles for telcos. Would you see CNCF helping with that directly and getting there, or do you see something else on that? In reference to your Kubernetes.
Yeah. So that very good. And I think here we are engaged in Anuket and the two different projects that it came out of. So we definitely see that as a good base, but also of course inside CNCF, and we have the CNF work group there. So definitely joining forces between Anuket and CNCF here would be a real important way forward.
Awesome, very good. And again, I think I don't have to mention this, but you and Ericsson in general have really helped with the collaboration of standards, alliances, and open source, as seen on your slide. The question is really around: do you see any missing pieces in terms of other standards organization or other alliances that we should be thinking about as a community when you look at verticals specifically?
I think to further work, I think one of the challenges with the operator industry or the telco industry is compared to, for example, the developer environment on hyperscalers, is the federation or alignment of interfaces. There I see a TM Forum and MEF, for example, as key areas to facilitate that east-west, and also facilitate the multi-vendor or integration around orchestration and business management logic. So those
Excellent.
are two areas where we are putting a lot of effort into.
Very good. All right, very good, Anders. Thank you very much for taking the time. Really appreciate your insights here.
Thank you very much.
All right. And I think there was another question that was directed probably at me from a Linux Foundation perspective, which was, one of the key objectives of LF is to maintain an ecosystem of multiple contributors in key markets. There's like 3 manufacturers for radio. How do you see them, in each of the market you see, what would happen if there's only 2 or 1? And I think I would probably be the first one to say that, first of all, it's not 3, it's more than 5. And more importantly, the disaggregation of the entire architecture allows for a lot more startups and innovators to join and then change the thinking and provide the pieces of the puzzle. In fact, to so much as, in which conference would you have back-to-back presentation from what I would say, which traditionally the world would call competitors, but they are collaborators in our open world. So with that said, our next speaker is from Nokia, and he is one of the most active executives in Linux Foundation from an open source perspective, board, strategy, etc. He's the head of open source initiatives at Nokia. Please welcome Jonne Soininen.
Hello. So I'm Jonne Soininen, and I work for Nokia. As Arpit said, I'm head of open source initiatives here. And I will be talking to you a little bit about my approach and our approach to open source and the edge, and then open source networking and the edge. But first of all, I have to say this is a great event, and it's been really interesting to see the great presentations. And I have to say I'm very humbled to be part of this great lineup where where there has been so many good speakers and with so many interesting areas. Now let's see if this works. It does. Great. So what does Nokia do? So what Nokia does is it builds networks. We are a network vendor. We do network infrastructure. We're one of the few vendors who have who are basically in all of the spaces of networking. And what we like to say that what we build is we build critical networks and technologies to bring together the world's intelligence. And what that means is that critical networks are the networks that are critical for this world. So it's not just a special kind of networks, but these are the networks that are critical for the world. So taking into account our service providers, industry automation, digitalization, and all this that enables basically us to move on as a digital world and what is needed in the digital transformation. Where we see is that this is an intersection of the carrier grade resilience and performance and the web scale elasticity and flexibility, and that is what we are aiming at. And as has been mentioned already during this week, we work with the leading vendors like Andre Fuchs from AT&T mentioned that we're working together, but we're also then working together to provide our services on our solutions on top of web scalers. So we're working like George from Google mentioned a little bit before in this forum as well. What do we base this on? So what we base this on in technology evolution that we think that matter, that technology evolution that we think is important. That first of all, it's clear it's cloud native software and the transformation to cloud native. That is a key transition in our industry today. We're proud to be leading that in our industry. This is something that we find extremely important. And this is something that is important not only for us, but also for our customers and for our compatibility with other platforms. This cannot be done without openness, without having the best performance and having the leading, basically having technologies and having architectures that are open, that provide the best performance and the lowest TCO for a multi-vendor environment. There is no possibility of closed environment succeeding anymore in this world, and therefore the openness is a big part of what we do. It's not just about, however, about software. It's also about silicon. It's also about hardware and making sure that we have the best silicon for our customers to use. And this is, of course, when we look at these things, many of these have aspects that we have discussed in this forum this week. Many of these aspects have aspects that are relevant to open source. However, we're not anymore in normal times. The world has changed last year in when COVID set in, and this has basically been a tremendous strain and a tremendous challenge, of course, for people individually, but also for our customers and for the industry as a whole. What we have there throughout the pandemic, we have focused on making sure that our customers can live through and can provide the best possible service during these times. And the three phases that we have basically focused on is secure, that we keep the networks up and running, scale, that we adapt to these demands, and stimulate, that we continue to evolve business models and use cases in this changing world. It is actually interesting to see that what we saw, we have published a report in our by our deep field department, and about how did we see that the world changed in the networks when the COVID set in. It is actually quite interesting to see that within the first weeks, the growth of traffic was about the same, so 30 to 40%, what you usually see in 1 year. The good thing is that basically the networks, that was what they were meant to do, and the networks survived without any glitches, and basically the everything worked. This is what we do. This is what we live for, is basically making sure that these critical networks work regardless what happens. And though this has been a very difficult time for everybody of us, and the testament of that is that we're now here remotely and we're not in the same place, everybody. Basically the telecom networks and the telecom paradigms are something that do help us do actually allow us to live through this and allow us to continue to work together. What I still do want to talk about a little bit is about openness. What does that mean for us, and what does that mean for the industry in our mind? We like to look at, when we look at openness, and as basically a question of 4 pillars. We have open forums, open interface, open culture, and open ecosystems. It is quite clear that the open source is a big part of this openness. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, how that fits in a little bit more in just a minute. But also the thing is basically we need also other things of openness for this to succeed. One of the key things that I would like to emphasize is the open culture. You cannot be open in terms of open source or in terms of open standards if you don't have an open culture inside your company to start with. That brings together then using the building blocks that open source, open standards, and so on create, opening interfaces and creating open ecosystems. But the culture is where everything starts from. And this is something that the company needs to have internally nurtured, and it is basically something that the company needs to, it needs to be built in rather than being something to add on. Otherwise, otherwise we cannot move forward, and we cannot actually provide the other pillars in this 4-pillar system. Now, if we look at the open forums, that is the area where we see open source, but we also see open standards and open architectures. Basically standards and open source is something that what we see as the two sides of the same coin. Standards are something that is needed to create interoperability and to ensure compatibility between different kind of implementations. Open source, on the other hand, fits the best into something where one implementation provides, so to say, the standard for the world. And of course, there is interaction between these. Basically, the open source sometimes implements standards, and standards sometimes references to open source. We see this nowadays more and more in the activities that we do, that there is an interaction between these, the two sides of the same coin. The thing is that often is, I have been asked previously, so do these things compete, and will open source win over standardization? Or will standardization be something that is actually more important, and is open source something that will fade away over time? We have had standardization for a very long time. Those will not go away, that is for sure. They are still needed, and they bring a basis for everything where there needs to be compatibility with between different kinds of implementations. That is augmented by open source nowadays in the industry, and there are basically places where open source is more direct tool and more adapt tool to actually bring the benefits. And we can see that especially in the areas where there's little differentiation between the players who are actually doing the open source together, that they have an interest to cooperate and they have an interest to come to a common solution. Standards, on the other hand, allow also more space for proprietary competition as well. But when we look at then open source, what are the areas where we are as Nokia interested and where we are participating in is basically when we look at the Linux Foundation space, it is, I mean, like you've seen these logos most probably and most definitely throughout the presentations here. So if we look at the open source projects that are important for us in the LF space and in the Linux Foundation space, it's clearly ORAN software community, LF networking, LF AI, and LF Edge, and we're part of those. Of course, something that is not on this slide is that what a lot is now built on, which is CNCF and the cloud native movement. These are areas where we are very much involved, where we are having board positions, where we are having TAC positions, where we are having also where we're active in the projects. And if we look at the kind of like couple of projects that are important for us in those spaces is, for instance, in ORAN software community, we are driving the near real-time RIC implementation. In LF networking, what we are working especially in ONAP and ANUCAT, and so on and so on. There and in addition to this, there are of course other open source organizations and open source projects, big and small, that where we're participating in. It's clear that open source basically defines big part of that, what telecommunication networking is today. Now, looking at the call for action, the thing is, and I think this was mentioned by somebody already before, it's important to work together. This is about open source, this is about community. We have different communities that are, but the important thing is to bring a big open source community where we work together. There is little room for competing technologies. It is better to make sure that we work together rather than trying to create new ones on top of the old ones. So this is very important, and this means also that we have to work in the communities that are actually responsible for those technologies, and we have to have those at least as upstream from projects that are where there is a relationship needed, and where the community that owns the technology is the place where we come together, even if we are discussing the technology somewhere else as well. The other thing is that for open source, it's quite important that we actually focus on the value. Where is that open source brings extra value? Where that we work together, it is not a point solution from one company, but it's actually something where we have contributed together, and we have compatibility and reusability over the industry is important. And that is, I think that it's clear that that's where open source is at its best. doing open source just to copy activities or copy basically something that is already there, that doesn't bring as much value as building something new and building something that where the community really has power. The least but not the last one, but not the least one, sorry, that way around, is of course then we should take security more seriously. The world has changed. Security is something that is now paramount for our customers, and the kind of like the threats have actually evolved as well. So in that sense, I think that what we need is to focus more on security that we have done before, and this is quite an important step that we need to do to make sure that open source is considered trustworthy also in the future. Now, that was what I considered to tell you. I'm very thankful and very honored to be part of this lineup. I hope you found this at least somewhat useful. If you have any questions, I think that there might be some time now, but then the question is also that you can contact me. I'm sure that you can find me on LinkedIn and so on, and ask any questions on that.
Oh, that was great. Thank you, Jonne, and really appreciate your insights here. So let me introduce the next speaker. He's from Facebook, obviously, but Brian Barritt, who's been a thought leader in a project called Magma, who had just recently moved to the Linux Foundation. And we are really excited to have Brian talk about the ecosystem and how Magma is a critical piece of an end-to-end 5G stack for the telecom mobile core. So please welcome Brian.
Great, thank you, Arpit. Hi, everyone. My name's Brian Barritt. I'm an engineering manager at Facebook Connectivity. So at Facebook Connectivity, our mission is to bring the world online to a better and faster internet. So let's start there with a bit of an overview of how we're doing so far. The state of global connectivity, there's some good news. Global access is improving. According to the International Telecommunications Union's Internet Bandwidth Index in 2020, total connectivity of the average household is increasing worldwide by about 45%, and 4G connections are increasing. So we now have 65% of lower and middle income countries have 4G coverage. But there are some problems still. One of them is that network performance is at risk. 3.3 billion people in developing and emerging markets are at risk of a degraded network performance by 2023. And Facebook cares about connectivity because it's good for the world and good for Facebook. Being connected opens up new opportunities to make yourself heard, to connect with people and communities you care about, and to build new businesses. So at Facebook Connectivity, one of the things we do is we look across the entire connectivity ecosystem and the value chain to try to understand the reasons why people have suboptimal connectivity and what we could do to improve it. One of the things we noticed is that in many markets, you have enough population density to really warrant a cellular network existing, but they don't exist in a lot of markets, or the ones that do exist aren't affordable by the average people. Because in markets where the average revenue per user is very low, often the existing telecom models of the network core, with the subscription models for licensing and the equipment costs, are just too high to make it affordable for a company to provide cellular coverage in that area. And so one of the things that we set out to do at Facebook Connectivity is to enable the open source telco, to catalyze an open source 5G movement, and to dramatically reduce the total cost of ownership of cellular networks. So we developed Magma. Magma was open sourced last year, and it just recently launched in February as a new Linux Foundation-based project. So Magma is different than other network cores. It's hyperscalable and also distributed. And so by distributed, I think it's fairly common now to see network cores where people have containerized their EPC and able to run it on a rack of servers at a point of presence or run it in the cloud. Magma goes a step further. You can run Magma like that if you want to, but Magma is also designed to run without a rack of servers anywhere. You can run Magma on very low-end, far edge appliances at the far edge of the network. So imagine a small, ruggedized x86 server for a couple $100, deploying one at each of your cell sites, letting them break out to IP right at the far edge, and having them all connect back to a control plane in the cloud or on-prem, on an on-prem cloud. It's open source and completely license free. So this is licensed with BSD 3-clause licensed, completely open source software, free for others to use, free for others to white label and sell. It's cloud native, both for central cloud, and we have work for even edge cloud native with control plane, user plane separation. It's vendor and transport agnostic. And it's also designed, shown in this diagram here, with an optional component where if you want to use Magma in a lower cost market, but still connect to a legacy core used on a larger network, you can federate with that larger core and inherit from the HSS and PCRF policies from an existing core and just use Magma in lower cost regions where it might be advantageous for you. And it's designed for all access convergence. So it's not just 4G, it's 4G, 5G, private LTE, and Wi-Fi, all in this open source solution. So at Facebook, we see the evolution of open source and telco following a similar model as enterprise. So 15 years ago, open source and enterprise started with, Red Hat shipping Linux on CDs and retail stores and hobbyists experimenting with Linux in niche use cases. You saw Linux users groups. Enterprise started adopting it, and eventually it gained broad adoption in the enterprise. Telco is where telco open source, we see following similar steps. Right now, you see niche deployments by cable, satellite operators in developing countries, places with low ARPU. And we see that growing in the same way, where there's select MNOs that are starting to pay attention and follow in the footsteps of Geo, Rakuten, Dish, looking at bringing more of these open solutions and open source implementations into their networks before we think it will then eventually gain as broad of adoption as open source has in enterprise now. And we think it'll be different between core and RAN. We think Open RAN will follow the journey of Open Compute, where there will be many implementations. And we think Open Core will follow the journey of Kubernetes or OpenStack, where there will be many attempts to make an open source telco stack, but there will be one emergent de facto implementation that will become the standard. And we hope that Magma is the basis of that standard. So in 2021, we established the Magma Core Foundation. Magma has been open source licensed since 2020, but we've started hearing a lot of interest from large organizations that would like to contribute meaningful teams of software engineers to the project. And a lot of mature organizations like to know there's a very familiar and trusted governance model for the project. So in 2021, Magma Core Foundation was established under the Linux Foundation so that we now operate under Linux Foundation governance, completely neutral. So Facebook continues to contribute a large team of software engineers to help anchor the ecosystem. But the ecosystem's really flourishing. We founded Magma Foundation with a number of large partners. We have participants from across the industry participating in Magma Foundation, either as founding members on the governing board or just participants in the open source movement. And we also have ecosystem partnerships with Open Infrastructure Foundation, Open Air Interface Alliance, and the Telekom Infra Project are all part of Magma. And we think because of this, it's really emerging as the de facto open source network core. So it's our belief that it will be the one open core implementation that is open source, converged, cloud native, and multi-tenant by design from the ground up. So here's how we're doing. we're really seeing a strong community growth in Magma. So this graph shows our growth in advocates, which are people that are working on Magma all the time, contributors, people that contribute to the code base, and participants, which is people that use Magma and converse in our Slack channels and ask questions and engage and comment on design. And that's really grown radically lately. In July of last year, we announced publicly that we had a partnership with Open Air Interface, Telekom Infra Project, and Open Infrastructure Foundation. And in February, we announced the Linux Foundation announcement, and you can see the large growth in the Magma community over that time. If you add to that observers, so these are people who have starred our repos or downloaded Magma or experimenting with it and using it, it's even larger. We have now over 1,000 people participating in the Magma ecosystem. So one of the things we're really trying to build a healthy, robust, self-sustaining ecosystem around Magma. And we do that in a few ways. One is that we partner with industry groups that are interested in helping scale with the number of developers, driving developer adoption. We partner with vendors and operators to help drive adoption of Magma, including people that want to participate in trials and deploy 5G or 4G networks in new areas, learn how to use Magma. We partner with academia because one of the things we're observing is that communities that want to experiment with the latest 5G release 16, release 17 features, open source is the place those things appear first, because if you're a scientist or a researcher, you want to experiment with bleeding edge features in the core or the RAN, the easiest place for you to do that is to start with open source and add the code you need for your new feature. And we partner with startups. There's a lot of people that are now building distros on Magma. Our partners at FreedomFi are one example. And so through these engagements, we help drive adoption of Magma, future use case experimentation, and innovation in the ecosystem. So I wanted to share a couple of really exciting things that partners, and startups, and ecosystem members are doing with Magma. These are just two of many highlights from our developers summit in February. One of them is our partnership with Amazon. So one of the things that Amazon did is leverage Magma's distributed architecture to make it one-click deployable on their far edge appliances. So everyone's probably familiar with Amazon central regions and maybe even Amazon outposts where you can put a rack of servers on-prem for Amazon Cloud. But they also have the Snowball and Snowcone far edge appliances that are shown here on the picture at left. And so working together, we actually demonstrated at the developers conference the ability to one-click deploy Magma, where the Magma control plane deploys to an AWS region, and the Magma user plane gets deployed on a number of Snowcone appliances that are just about this big, that have e-ink shipping labels, and you can ship them out anywhere in the world and plug them in, and they zero-touch provision connect back into the central cloud. Another really exciting use case our partners have done with Magma is found with a partnership between FreedomFi and Helium, which is a crypto blockchain organization. So unlike normal cryptocurrencies where you burn electricity to mine Bitcoins, with Helium, you mine Helium coins by connecting the unconnected. So Helium has operated previously with LoRaWAN, where you connect LoRaWAN hotspots at your house, and they all join together to make one large IoT network. But with a partnership with FreedomFi, they're bringing that use case to 4G and 5G so that you connect a Magma-based appliance, connect a 4G or 5G radio. It calls in and gets CBRS spectrum from a spectrum allocation service, makes a small 5G hotspot, and they all join together to make one larger network and mine Helium crypto coins for providing coverage and allowing users to obtain internet access through that hotspot. So it's a real people's network for connecting the unconnected, which is a really interesting and exciting use case behind Magma. So we'd like to invite everyone on this call to join us and build your connectivity, software as a service, enterprise, or consumer business faster with Magma and help ride this 5G wave with us. There's a few ways you can get involved. If you're an industry group, we'd like to work with you to bring your developer scale and evangelize Magma to your users in your community, and to help support and drive adoption of Magma use cases in your community. If you're a vendor or a systems integrator, Magma is really designed to be brought to market through systems integrators and value-added resellers that want to build their own distros. So we invite you to partner with us and create development teams to focus on Magma development and integrate it as a key part of your open source strategy to help you build with Magma and use it as a production grade commercial ready Lego block for you to build a larger solution that you want to take to market, and lean on the Magma community to help leapfrog your competition in a post-COVID world. If you're an operator or a service provider, we think Magma is pretty compelling because it lets you take control of your 5G vision and destiny and say goodbye to vendor lock-in, help you get full visibility in your production networks right from the code level, including shift left for DevSecOps on security vulnerabilities, because you can see them right in the source base and patch them very quickly. And if you're a startup or investor, you can leverage Magma Stack to build faster and accelerate your product development and time to market. You can lean on our expert community to leapfrog your competition and explore adjacencies. And lastly, if you're in academia or in the public domain, you can leverage the Magma Stack for your academic research and R&D projects, unlock future use cases, and collaborate for advancing open source telco and 5G to next G movements. So we have some really exciting opportunities we're already seeing with 5G release 16 and 17 features with integrated access and backhaul, and non-terrestrial network connectivity with public sector opportunities from DARPA and the European Space Agency and the US DoD lining up behind this. Thank you for your time. We'd like to invite you to engage after this. Today, Magma release 1.4 is releasing today. You can find that on magmacore.org. You can join us on GitHub, pull the repo, start building, start developing, and join us on Slack at magmacore.slack.com. We'd love to help you get started. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. That was insightful. And without any further delays, I'm going to move to the next speaker here, Shawn Zandi, who is the head of engineering at LinkedIn. Another one of those very sharp thought leader, technically very insightful, and we're glad to have you here. So Shawn, take it away.
Thank you very much, Arpit. It's great to be here. It's a pleasure to present at this event. I'm here to talk about our software approaches in infrastructure that we're running in LinkedIn. About LinkedIn, what is LinkedIn? LinkedIn is an online platform that connects sports professionals. I've been at LinkedIn during a time of incredible growth. Our growth in member engagement has generated enormous need for data storage, for infrastructure and operation at scale that forced us to change the way that we architect and operate our network. Currently, we have nearly 740 members in 200 countries with more than 57 million companies have a page on LinkedIn. COVID has increased our member engagement to a new scale. During the COVID last year, from March to December, we saw a 6 times increase in number of remote job posting in the United States. To demonstrate the scale and importance of our infrastructure, we serve close to 40 trillion Kafka messages per day, and our economic graph has grown to 200 billion graph edges. This demand from our LinkedIn platform requires us constantly grow our infrastructure and scale our data center, backbone, and edge network to serve our platform. In terms of vision, our vision for network and infrastructure engineering is to use the best methods and practices to provide a reliable infrastructure to LinkedIn. We believe that infrastructure network in general is there to enable our business and application. And the network is definitely so important, but its importance is enabling business and application capabilities. And the more that it becomes transparent, the more value it can bring. For us to keep up with the scale demands, capacity requirements, and operations first mindset, we put our focus on programmability of our infrastructure to deploy new pods seamlessly on data center, provide self-healing capabilities, reduce operational toil to scale our application out closer to our members and improve the performance. We started our journey to disaggregation in 2015, and our intent was to speed up in innovation velocity, bring the features that we needed most faster into production, and by owning those features, control our network architecture and destiny. As our network grew, we realized that we should pivot our focus and our investment on the software and ideally a uniform code across different hardwares that we operate in our network. Open Switch project under Linux Foundation was very important to us. Running Linux on switches and routers enabled us to use the same toolset that we use on our servers and our compute and extend the same philosophy to our network devices. Now with Sonic, over a dozen different SKUs, including a variety of different OEM, ODM, and Open19 platforms are supported in a uniform fashion that we can run same Sonic software across multiple different hardwares with different chipset. By using switch abstraction interface or SI, we utilize the latest silicon from 12.8 to 25 terabit, and it enabled us to uplift our data center from 100 gig to 400 gig across the board. In order to scale our routing and control plane, we onboarded free-range routing to Sonic Community, or FRR, under Linux Foundation. That enabled us to scale our BGP network in data center and improve ECMP properties to have better control over routing convergence and management of how routes get propagated across the network. We also designed our own data center routing protocol based on linked state properties to improve better utilization of forwarding paths in a widely connected parallel fabric, which is open sourced and is available on free-range routing as Fabric D, as we call it in LinkedIn Open Fabric. Moving on to control and management plane, I believe one easy step toward programmability is to move network to Linux. We have Linux as the default experience from, of course, compute, but top of rack switches to spine and leaf, along with our management network. This enabled us to design our network just like a distributed system as opposed to conventional box by box operation. The next step for us was, instead of using different management protocols that were difficult to customize, such as SNMP, syslog, SFlow, we came up with a standard way of pulling and pushing data out of the network elements using a POP-SOP pipeline in a distributed manner. We developed NetCM, which is our common platform for network configuration management based on OpenConfig and Yang models. And its job is not only to perform provisioning and configuration tasks, but also compare configs and notify us about configuration drifts amongst thousands of network elements that we operate in our data centers. Telemetry data is sent from each element to distributed set of collectors to process. And those collectors can convert patterns and make meaningful and context out of that data that we can feed into time series database, count the frequencies of individual or related events, or perform data science to improve our data aggregation and also our self-healing properties that I'm going to talk about. The other aspect of managing network as a distributed system is that if you store network state at a point of time, then you can perform data analytics by going back to previous stored state for root cause analysis, or restore the last known good state when needed. It opens up many possibilities and make things quite interesting. For example, you can replay how your routing system reacts and follow update propagation across the distributed system and figure out inconsistencies and perhaps black holes or micro loops or longer convergence time. And by understanding that data, you can use it as feedback loop to reiterate and improve on those findings and make your infrastructure better. Moving on to forwarding plane, we talked about properties of control plane and management plane. And this is something that comes along with control plane, but is mostly focused on forwarding plane. I want to talk about a project that we spent past couple of years, and we're happy to announce that we're working with the Linux Foundation to open source it to the community. I believe the philosophy of network monitoring, or fundamental value, is to quickly identify if network is the root cause of a problem. Whenever a GCN happens, regardless of symptoms, network is legitimate suspect, and if it's not a network issue, then we should be able to rule ourselves out as quickly as possible. And data is the ultimate authority. For us, Argos provides that data to know if there's a fault in the network and where it is. Argos is our forwarding plane telemetry, fault detection, and fault isolation system. Operating a large-scale data center, there are many components, links, optics, network elements can go down. Mean time between failure is directly proportional to the number of components in a system. Argos creates a network between participating end hosts, probing each other and connected through Kafka pipeline. It measures performance of every single connection in the network from host to host perspective and creates a matrix that consists of SLA, such as latency, loss, jitter for different connections. Argos helped us in not only detecting network issues, but also pointing out what node or link across the network have that problem. It also provides an input to our self-healing system to steer traffic away from the fault, change the ECMP grouping for better hashing, and provide the best delivery to our application. So Open Fabric is the evolution of how we architect and operate our infrastructure at LinkedIn. Moved us from box by box to a completely distributed system based on open source that was realized by shifting our investment to software and code. The intent is not solving all of the problems by centralizing or distributing them, but to have a programmable network stack that can enable seamless service provisioning, scale on demand, and self-healing capabilities to make network as transparent as possible, and to enable business to serve our members. As for call for action, the value of any open source project is in the community and participation behind it. At the LinkedIn, our engineering team has open sourced close to 100 projects spanning different categories, including data, framework, system operation, testing. We believe that open sourcing project makes our engineers better at what they do. They grow in their craft by having their work shared with the community and reviewed. This project gained broad adoption that are now part of Apache Software Foundation and Linux Foundation as well. There are many tools that internal web scale companies use internally that can bring tremendous value to the industry. And I would like to invite everyone to join us in open source. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks a lot, Shawn. And I would like to sort of first of all say, it has been such a change. And for those of you who would like to ask questions, again, I think I missed the opportunity to say that in the previous session with Brian and Jonne, but please do a Q&A on the top right. But we really welcome, what a change from, say 5 years ago when it was a proprietary telecom type industry. Now we have the cloud, we have the enterprise end users, and leaders like yourself and Facebook and others, right? Like from a Web 2.0 or a web scale company. And the thing that we really like, or the community likes, is the fact that these tools that you have deployed and use and that you're contributing back to the community through open source, they're at scale. They have been proven, and we can all utilize the benefit and make the networks much better. So there's a couple of other questions that have also come in. If you have I think we have a couple of minutes. Yep, sure. How do you see the enterprise data centers, the massively scalable data centers like the Azures of the world, etc., which have very custom workloads, but they're very simple in nature, versus sort of the LinkedIn, which also have 1 or 2 5 unique workloads, versus a telco data center or an edge data. Like, how do you see the evolution of these workloads getting spun up between different types of data centers?
Yeah, excellent question. Enterprise networks are back in the day, they were designed around this 3 hierarchical system of access, distribution, and core, and we used to see the same set of switches being used. The intelligence was in the core, and then access was purely connecting nodes together. The shift that we're seeing now, as opposed to bring the traffic through the network to the core and then process it there or send it to service modules like load balancing and firewall, at scale, people are trying to make network as simple as possible, just provide massive bandwidth between nodes. We see service mesh, we see distributed way of deploying application. So network becomes just a bunch of boxes that provide massive bandwidth, and then services can be easily moved to the edge to be processed by for load balancing, for firewall, and different reasons. I can see that the enterprise is following the footsteps of large scale in terms of simplifying the core and then bring the intelligence to the edge.
Gotcha. Very nice. Well, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for contributing back, and really appreciate your insights here, Shawn. Thank you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right. So with that, I think we have, we're saving obviously a very important member of the global ecosystem, and some of you may, most of you may know him for his vision and leadership, but everybody knows Deutsche Telekom and their global footprint. And if you see the ONIF and the types of speakers, we are basically representing almost 70% of the global subscribers as covered by these carriers, right? DT being one of the top ones. So without any further delay, please welcome Arash Ashouriha, SVP Group Technology Innovation at Deutsche Telekom. Arash.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for having me. What I like to do today is to, after all these great talks from different industry leaders, put a bit of an operator hat and look at this whole development from an operator view. And from an operator view, obviously, if you look at different aspects, we have challenges on one side because there's a level of competition with hyperscalers on one side and cooperation on the other side. There's a lot of change in customer needs and behavior. We started to see that with the launch of 5G, and particularly with the pandemic and the way the pandemic forced a hybrid way of working, top-notch connectivity anytime, anywhere, is bringing new requirements. Then you have, obviously, from an operator's perspective, it's very difficult to innovate. So you always need to be very focused about, where you're going to put your bets on. And we have, as Deutsche Telekom, we always have this ambition, not only to be the leading European telco, but the innovation is our DNA. And we have set up a very clear strategy for infrastructure, which is basically transform that infrastructure to new, open, distributed, cloud-based, and eventually cloud-native architecture with simpler, more intelligent, and automated production model, end-to-end. And obviously, the 3 ingredients to do that is disaggregation, both in mobile and fixed. I will cover that. It will be the use the notion of cloud and cloud nativeness, orchestration, and most importantly, in order to monetize the asset, open APIs. We have been sharing the left part of this picture with all of our partners around the globe, which is this is the foundation from the network differentiation program which we have. And it boils down to the three things I mentioned: disaggregation, orchestration, unification, and open APIs. Now, if you look in disaggregation, it's public that for us, Open RAN, as a founding member of XRAN, which then turned into Open RAN, we clearly believe in open ecosystem, and we are heavily driving that as within all the communities, from ORAN Alliance itself to TIP, to Linux Foundation, to ONAP, and to many others, ONF, to drive that open ecosystem. And we believe this is not something individual operators should drive on their own. We need to create scale, and we need to create speed of demand. And therefore, we have lined up with all the leading European telcos and have published an MOU on ORAN in order to foster innovation and to drive the ecosystem development with high speed. We also have set up an Open TIC Lab in Berlin, which is not a Telekom exclusive. In fact, it's together with Telefonica and Vodafone, our competitors in Europe, and all our major suppliers who are open, like Nokia, who are open, Mavinia, Samsung, who are open to work with us in that space. And the idea there is to jointly drive open standard, leverage collaboration, and create an environment where you can have different telcos working and collaborating with the suppliers. On the fixed side, we have been pioneers on what we call Access 4.0, which we did on the ONF, to drive disaggregation on fixed, basically on OLT level and BNG. We have trialed in labs, we did POCs, and we are running customer-friendly trials, and we are actually live with few thousands of customers, and we are now looking for partnerships to scale that up and make sure that we can roll this out across our footprint, starting in Germany. In terms of open APIs, the real promise of 5G is obviously network slicing, industry connectivity. But we also believe there is more. There is, we have defined control points in terms of how do we want to collaborate with hyperscalers and what is strategic for us. So for us, the network is a platform rather than just a pipe for connectivity. And we are trying to make use of common APIs to drive monetization, even in hyperscaler partnerships in the future. And then last but not least, in terms of leveraging the cloud for the telco, we think finally with 5G SA core, as already mentioned with some of the previous speakers, we have the right technology at hand to, as a foundation, to drive cloud nativeness in an operator environment. And for us at Deutsche Telekom, 5G Core SA, which we did very recently an announcement, is the first cloud native network function at Deutsche Telekom. And obviously, we're going to build on that to drive network slicing and development of end-to-end capabilities for our customers, B2B and B2C. And we have running trials with multiple leading suppliers. For those of you who are following Deutsche Telekom, you know that the zero-touch automation has been a vision which we have been heavily vocal and promoting for many, many years. We have been active in multiple organizations in the industry driving the economy, driving the community towards that vision. And we obviously, automation is a transformation which we started years ago, and it was domain by domain, project by project. And I think we have achieved the point where, for me, if I look from now onwards, is about harmonization and scaling up so that you can reuse and reproduce those solutions across your network and across different countries. We really believe in engagement in open source and standard interfaces, and to drive APIs for successful integration. And I personally believe that this is key. If you want to master the disaggregation, you need to master the APIs and the interfaces and the integration part of that. Now, we are a big player in the community. As I mentioned earlier on, in O-RAN, as you know, we have been a founding member. In fact, Dr. Alex Choi is the COO of the O-RAN Alliance. We heavily focused on disaggregation strategy for the RAN part on O-RAN. And for the first time, at least to my knowledge, we went from day one, we planned this to be not just another POC or another lab. Actually, we have developed the concept, what we call O-RAN Town, which is a big program run by the best people in the company, cross-functional team between group and people from Germany, Czech, and other places within our community, which is about to bring O-RAN to life. And the O-RAN Town is actually is a physical area in the live network in Germany, where we're going to build an O-RAN network, 5G O-RAN network, and where we want to not only test and see in a real scenario the behavior of the network and the customer experience, but most importantly, we want to have that network integrated into our operational procedures, which is one of the most difficult tasks. And there where ONAP is coming to play. So we have decided to develop a service management orchestration for the O-RAN Town, fully based on ONAP. We have completely up-geared the amount of resources and our engagement in this case to make sure that we learn, we take the community, but we are also able to adapt the learnings and make sure that we are ready for the next modernization cycles with a full end-to-end Open RAN solution, which actually can be operated with an operator-grade class, given our DNA as the network leadership and quality leadership brand who we are. And another thing I want to mention is that the engagements in all of these different forums has enabled us to influence, to participate, and to contribute on the journey for the transformation. But it remains one major challenge which I like to address and to actually have a call for action. If we are honest to each other, is all these initiatives over the last 7-10 years have been the foundation of that was always a thought. There is something we want to address, or some bright people came with the idea to address, and they believe that it cannot be done the standard way via the classical, traditional standardization bodies for multiple reasons, speed, coordination. So people are coming up with a new initiative. And I have to say now, looking back, over the last couple of years, we had one initiative after the other, and they are growing like mushrooms. Now, all of them make sense. The problem is we are disaggregating. So we have, I think, one of the most, and this is my plea to the whole forum and to our industry, is we need to make use of all these forums, but we need to be careful because we are risking in redoing work, There's a bit of competition, and from an operator perspective, and I'm sure for the suppliers it's the same. It's basically the same resources. So you have a resource pool which you need to put on all these forums and try to drive and to manage. So my plea would be, let's work more together. Let's see where we can collaborate more, and be very precise what topic we want to address where, to make sure that we use those forums as best as possible and don't create any kind of overlap and any kind of, let's say, duplication of work. And number two is we have, in terms of, at the end of the day, whatever we do, we don't want this to be another track. We want one track of standardization. So there needs to be also a feedback loop. And I think that was mentioned again earlier by one of the presenters, that we need to make sure that all these great initiatives, all this innovation will ultimately find its way to the main track and doesn't stay as something, let's say, an alternative. Because what it does is it creates diversion, and we are missing, again, scale opportunity. Now, if I would have a couple of, let's say, wishes to history, and I think to all the listeners, from a telco perspective, it's essential that we have to try hard to harmonize the pass layer in order to lower the effort of onboarding for all the different variation and incarnation of operator clouds. So I think we need to really think to go one level higher and think about ways to try to harmonize, at least limit the number of variation in on the pass layer to enable faster adaptation. Why? Because if not, there is a very high cost of integration. If you put that cost in every project, you will realize that the business case won't work. And a lot of time, if you go for the cost, you're gonna not be cloud native, or you basically are not using the latest technology. That's number one. Number two is with 5G standalone, and again that was covered previously from the from, I think it was Ericsson, but from the operator perspective, whatever we do in this space, the CNCF compliancy has to be there. We need to make sure that the solutions are compliant, so that we are all in this industry able to monetize the infrastructure and expose APIs. And then obviously I've been following the development of ONAP, and I think we came far, a long journey. However, my plea is we need much more engagement, particularly from the operator community. We need more engagement. If we want this to be, this to be a solution where the local adaptation is just part of the job, but not basically needing to working out many different aspects of a solution, which is still a bit in development, we need more operator engagement with all the experience from integration, day-to-day operations, all the pain points. This needs to be fully covered, and we are super committed. We are putting a large number of people in all these initiatives and driving that. And again, we are happy to work together. I think if there is a biggest learning in the telco industry is you compete on customer experience, and wherever it makes sense and legally allowed, you collaborate on technology development and technology innovation. And with that, I end my presentation. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Oh, very good, Arash. Excellent call to actions. And you know, the questions are coming in. I would like to make sort of 3 quick comments on yours as well. You know, it was just last ONES in EU when Dr. Alex Choi actually presented or launched the concept of Orantown. And, you know, in just less than even 6 months, it's been such a big success, you know, thanks to you and your leadership. particularly excited about the use of ONAP and the contributing community. So that's kind of very good. I like your reuse and reproduce statement. As you scale and as you kind of get there. On the pass, I do want to bring up to the attendees as well. A new project called XG Villa has been incubated into LF networking. It's kind of a contribution from several service providers globally that is looking at the pass problem and kind of standardizing it. So your call to action there is absolutely important. And then on the cloud native as well, CNCF and LFN are extremely tightly working on the whole definition, testing, workbench, etc. So absolutely great insights. There's one question that has come up, which is, would DT prefer if 5G RAN were completely standardized around ORAN, or can there be a partial ORAN with a coexisting proprietary RAN solution work also in the interim? Like how do you envision the full journey to ORAN based solutions from where we are today?
Very good question. Thanks for that. And to be honest, if you ask what we vision and what we wish, obviously it has to be for us as a carrier grade 1 type of requirement. It's essential that it's ORAN based, and ultimately all the ORAN standards should be, the whole specification should be adopted sooner or later by 3GPP. So as I said earlier on, and we have seen this in the past in many different areas, the biggest success of the mobile industry has been that there were interoperability across the world for different purposes. Now, what has happened is with that, and it was great. And I'm someone who is very proud to spend 20 years, soon 21 years in the telecommunication, and I've been following, the hype before 3G, and the big disappointment on 3G, the great success of 4G, and now with 5G. However, we have to admit the standardization of today is dominated by suppliers who put a lot of efforts and yes. And so single RAN is a closed system. So with the ORAN Alliance, the idea is not only to open up interfaces to have an alternative, but basically make that the de facto standard of the future along the way. And that's what our plea, and that's where we are working at, together with our other operator community as well as our partners.
Gotcha. No, this is exciting, very exciting, and we really appreciate all the leadership from Deutsche Telekom on the open source world. Absolutely. So thank you for taking the time. Very insightful. I'm sure the community gained a lot, especially your call to action. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Alrighty. And so to wrap it up, I want to present 2 quick slides as a summary. So if you want to sort of put that up, it's all collaboration and open innovation, and you must have seen through the rest of the 3 days that we focused a lot on that. So if you go to the next slide, I showed this as an architecture diagram, and you heard the theme, from disaggregation to reaggregation, right? So from POC to production, right? Chris Rice said it well, Arash said it very nicely, right? How do you do collaborations between these projects so that they can be used in an end-to-end solution? We heard from Arna Networks on how a proposal to do a 5G super blueprint could be done in LF networking. So I think the industry is moving from these individual projects to gluing them together for deployment. So not only are these projects deployed individually, but the integration is all becoming open. So it's right, open solutions. So if you go to the next slide, which I showed, this is why when I opened the open ONIF, I showed this slide, and it may not have registered with everybody, but you now can see that we had presenters from multiple verticals that are wanting to use open source in their industry. They don't know everything, but they do know that this is the way to go forward. We heard from Madeline today on the broadcasting industry, right? Where ONAP and ORAN, ONAP network slicing, ORAN, SC play a large building block. We heard from the government of and DoD yesterday, or sorry, on Wednesday. We have heard from governments and other policy from developing countries in EU, APAC, etc., right? Where there's a lot of global connectivity going on. You heard Brian talk about that in the Facebook presentation, right? How do you drive it into the remote and the rural areas, build on these in open source projects? And then most importantly, the enterprise networking industry, right? Whether it's private 5G, LTE, you heard from Shawn on all the end-to-end visibility and monitoring. You heard from Walmart, right? Trying to drive visibility across their workloads. And then most importantly, you heard from several of these verticals in the edge and IoT space that are utilizing unique applications on cameras or sensors or manufacturing or retail. So this is all coming together, and we are really excited that we have been an enabler to help facilitate you all coming together and contributing here. So that's kind of my closing. 2021 is going to be a great year. We're looking forward to seeing everybody, hopefully in person. This is right now planned as a hybrid event in October 11th, 12th, LA. This will be a large, co-located and a joint event, right? So that whole week, just block it off, right? We have KubeCon right after ONES, and we're integrating everything seamlessly for you. But let's stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you all for joining. And thank you for all the questions. Hope you like the format of 3 days, 3 hours, 3 time zones, very quick, no fluffy stuff, live. And thank you all for all the speakers. Signing out now. Thank you.